They said she drowned him for the land. They said she smiled when they dragged the river. They said a woman who don't weep ain't got no soul left to save. The water ran cold that autumn morning, and Maria Caldwell stood knee-deep in the Snake-Eye River, with her skirts heavy as iron. The sun hadn't cleared the ridge, and cottonwoods hung their yellow leaves like torn flags overhead. Her hands were blue at the knuckles, searching the silt beneath the surface, and the child in her belly pressed against her ribs like a fist. She'd been there since before dawn, alone, because no one in Prospect Bend would come near her now. 3 weeks since they found Samuel face down in the shallows downstream, his boot caught in tree roots, his mouth full of river mud. 3 weeks since the whispers started. How convenient, they said. Him dying just when the spring had come, in good on their 40 acres, just when the cattle fetch had gone high. 3 weeks since Reverend Coltrane stood on the chapel steps and called her a Jezebel in a cotton dress. But Maria hadn't sold the land, hadn't run. She'd gone to the river instead, every morning, searching. Her fingers brushed something smooth, lodged between 2 stones. She pulled it free. A band of tarnished silver, thin as a whisper, with an inscription worn nearly gone. To Samuel, from his mother, 1867. The wedding ring he never took off. The one that should have been on his finger when they pulled him from the water. It wasn't. Maria closed her fist around it, the metal cold against her palm. If the ring was here, 2 miles upstream from where they found Samuel's body, then he hadn't drowned where they said. He'd gone in farther up, or been put in. She looked toward the ridge, where sun bled gold over pines. Smoke rose from town, a mile west. The church spire stood white as bone. They'd already judged her, scratched her name from the congregation ledger, told her she wasn't welcome at the mercantile, the mill, Sunday supper. The only reason they hadn't run her out was Sheriff Good said there wasn't proof enough to hang her, and hanging a pregnant woman, even a wicked one, didn't sit right with the county judge. Maria tucked the ring into her apron pocket and waded to shore, boots squelching in clay. By the time she reached the road, her teeth were chattering. The Caldwell place sat at the end of a long dirt track, a cabin of rough-hewn pine with a barn that leaned like a drunk. Everything looked the same, except Samuel wasn't there, and Maria was alone, and the baby kicked like it knew. She saw the horse before she saw the man, a tall roan gelding tied to the post, and sitting on her porch step was a stranger in a faded cavalry coat, hat in his hands. He stood when he saw her, lean and weathered, maybe 40, with a face like driftwood left too long in sun. His gun sat low on his hip. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said quietly. "I don't know you," Maria said, hand drifting to the ring in her pocket. "Name's Josiah Trent. I rode with your husband during the war." He turned his hat slowly. "I heard what happened. You're late. They buried him 2 weeks ago. I wasn't invited." He glanced toward the road. "I want to know if you killed him." "Get off my land." "Samuel wrote me 3 months ago. Said men in town wanted his water rights. Said if anything happened, I should come." Maria's pulse stuttered. "He never told me." "He wouldn't have." She looked at him long, the wind whipping her skirts. The ring felt heavy. "They think I killed him for the land." "Did you?" "No." Josiah nodded once. "Then we got work to do." The town didn't need proof. They had something better, a story that made sense to fearful men with land to protect. and wives to keep obedient. Josiah didn't ask permission. He unsaddled his horse, led it to the barn, and filled the trough from the well. Mariah watched from the porch, the ring still tight in her fist, trying to decide if she should trust him or shoot him. "You got coffee?" he called from the barn door. "No." "Chicory?" "Maybe." He walked toward her, spurs clinking soft in the dirt. Up close she could see the gray threading his temples, the deep lines around his mouth. He'd seen hard years. They showed in every step. Inside, the cabin was cold. The stove had gone out overnight, and Mariah's hands shook as she tried to strike the flint. Josiah took it from her gently, got the kindling lit, and set water to boil without a word. He moved like a man used to taking care of things quietly. "Show me the ring," he said. She pulled it from her pocket and placed it on the table between them. It sat there catching firelight, small and damning. Josiah picked it up, turned it in his fingers, read the inscription. This was his mother's. He showed it to me once, said he'd die before he took it off. He looked at Mariah. "Where'd you find it?" 2 miles upstream, wedged in the stones where the current runs fast by Widow's Bend." "That's not where they found him." "No." Josiah set the ring down carefully. "Someone moved the body, made it look like he drowned fishing near the house." He leaned back, jaw working. "Who wanted your land?" "Horace Blackwell owns the mill. He's been buying up water rights for 2 years. Offered Samuel $300 last spring. Samuel said no." She wrapped her arms around her belly. "Blackwell's got the sheriff in his pocket. Got the reverend too, probably. Half the town owes him money." "And when Samuel died, Blackwell figured a widow alone couldn't hold the land. He figured I'd sell cheap or run." Mariah's voice went hard. "He figured wrong." The water boiled. Josiah made something that barely passed for coffee and pushed a cup toward her. It smelled like burned roots and tasted worse, but it was warm. "They did something to you," he said quietly, "besides the whispers." Mariah didn't answer right away. She pulled down the collar of her dress, just enough to show the mark. A brand, crude and deliberate, burned into the skin above her collarbone. The letter M for murderous, done with a hot iron while 4 men held her down in the church basement after Samuel's funeral. Reverend Coltrane had prayed while they did it, asked God to mark Cain so all would know her sin. She'd screamed. No one came. Josiah's face went stone still. His hand curled into a fist on the table. "Who?" "Blackwell's men. The Reverend blessed it." She pulled her collar back up. Said it was righteous judgment. For a long moment, Josiah said nothing. Then he stood, walked to the window, looked out at the empty road. "They'll come for you again. Soon as they figure you're not leaving." "I know. You can't fight them alone." "I know that too." Mariah's voice cracked just slightly. "But I got nowhere to go, and I won't let them have what Samuel died for." Josiah turned back to her. In the firelight, his face looked carved from something old and unyielding. "Then we make them prove it. Make them say out loud what they did. In front of witnesses they can't buy." "How?" "There's a circuit judge comes through in 2 weeks. We get him here. We get you a fair hearing. We show them that ring and ask questions they can't answer." He picked up the silver band. "This is proof Samuel didn't die where they said. That's reasonable doubt. That's enough to break their story. And if it's not?" Josiah met her eyes. "Then we run, and I'll make sure you and that baby get somewhere safe." Mariah looked at him. This stranger who'd ridden into her life, carrying ghosts and old debts. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she knew she couldn't do this alone. "All right," she whispered. Outside, the wind picked up, and somewhere in town, men were already gathering. Section 3: The Crack in Silence. Fear makes cowards of good men, but sometimes, just sometimes, it makes warriors of the small and forgotten. The town meeting was called for Sunday after service. Blackwell made sure of it, announced from the pulpit that there were matters of community safety to discuss. Everyone knew what that meant. They were going to decide what to do with Mariah Caldwell. Josiah and Mariah rode in together at dawn, before the church bells rang. The streets were empty, except for a few early risers sweeping boardwalks. Eyes followed them from windows, curtains dropping quickly when Mariah looked back. They tied the horses outside the general store. Josiah kept his hand near his gun, not threatening, just ready. Mariah wore her cleanest dress, the brand hidden beneath a high collar, her belly unmistakable now in the morning light. "Stay close to me," Josiah said quietly. "Don't answer if they try to rile you. Let me talk." She nodded, though her hands trembled. The church filled slowly. Families in their Sunday clothes, men with hard faces, women who wouldn't meet Mariah's eyes. She sat in the back pew, with Josiah beside her, feeling the weight of their stares like stones. Reverend Coltrane stood at the front, his Bible closed, his expression righteous and cold. Blackwell sat in the front row, a thick man with silver hair and a gold watch chain, dressed like prosperity itself. Sheriff Good stood near the door, arms crossed, star gleaming on his vest. When the room was full, Blackwell stood. He didn't wait for the Reverend. "We all know why we're here," he said, voice carrying easy over the hushed crowd. "Samuel Caldwell was a good man, an honest man, and his death was a tragedy." He paused, let the silence build. "But we got to face facts. His widow won't sell the land, won't leave, and there's been, questions." "What questions?" Josiah's voice cut through the room like a blade. Blackwell turned, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" "Josiah Trent. I served with Samuel, and I got questions of my own." He stood, pulled the silver ring from his pocket, held it up where everyone could see. "This is Samuel's wedding ring, the one he never took off. I found it 2 miles upstream from where his body was discovered. How'd it get there, if he drowned fishing near his house like you all said?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Blackwell's jaw tightened. "Could have washed downstream," Sheriff Good said lazily. "Upstream," Josiah corrected. "Against the current, in fast water." He stepped into the aisle. "Samuel was killed at Widow's Bend, and his body moved. Someone wanted it to look like an accident close to home. Someone who'd benefit from his land coming available." Blackwell's face went red. "You calling me a murderer?" "I'm asking questions, same as you. This ain't a court." "Then let's make it one." Josiah's voice went hard. "Circuit judge comes through in 10 days. Let him hear the evidence. Let him decide if Mariah Caldwell's guilty or if someone else wanted Samuel dead." The room erupted, men shouting, women gasping, Reverend Coltrane calling for order. Blackwell jabbed a finger toward Mariah. "She's a liar and a witch. She's got a mark," someone shouted from the middle pews. Mariah's hand flew to her collar, but it was too late. A woman in the crowd, Martha Yates, the schoolteacher, stood up, face pale, but voice steady. "I saw what you did to her," Martha said, looking straight at Reverend Coltrane. "After the funeral, in the church basement, 4 men held her down, and you burned her. Called it God's justice." Her voice shook but didn't break. "That ain't God. That's cruelty." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Coltrane's face went white. "Sister Martha, you don't understand." "I understand plenty." Martha's hands were fists at her sides. "My husband died last year. Fell off a roof. Nobody branded me. Nobody called me murderous." She looked around at the crowd. "We're so busy being afraid of a pregnant widow, we can't see what's right in front of us. Samuel Caldwell's ring don't lie, and neither does that brand on her skin." A child's voice piped up from the back. "My mama says Mrs. Caldwell gave us eggs when we was hungry." Another voice. An old man near the front. "Samuel told me Blackwell threatened him, said he'd regret not selling." The crack had started, small but growing. Blackwell slammed his hand on the pew. "This is nonsense. Sheriff, remove these people." "No." Sheriff Good's voice was quiet, but it stopped everything. He pushed off from the wall, looked at Blackwell with something new in his eyes, something like doubt. "I think maybe we should wait for the judge after all." Blackwell's face went purple, but he said nothing. Josiah took Mariah's arm gently. "Come on." They walked out together through the silent crowd, and for the first time in 3 weeks, no one tried to stop them. Section 4. The Fire and the Reckoning. Justice don't come clean in places where power's taken root. Sometimes it comes with blood and smoke, and the smell of things burning that should have burned long ago. They came for her that night. Mariah woke to the sound of horses and voices, low and ugly in the darkness. Josiah was already up, standing at the window with his rifle, face grim in the moonlight streaming through the gaps in the shutters. "How many?" she whispered, pulling herself from the bed, her belly heavy and awkward. 6, maybe 7. He checked the rifle's load. "Blackwell's not waiting for the judge." Mariah's heart hammered against her ribs. She reached for Samuel's old shotgun hanging above the door, the one he'd taught her to shoot when they first homesteaded. Her hands didn't shake now. Fear had burned itself out, left only something cold and clear behind. "Back door?" Josiah asked. "Leads to the root cellar. Opens 20 yards into the tree line. Take it. Get to the river. Follow it north to the Dunaway place. They're good people." "What about you?" He looked at her then, something fierce and final in his pale eyes. "I'm going to make them answer for what they done." "They'll kill you." "Maybe." He checked his revolver, spun the cylinder. "But they ain't touching you again." Outside, a voice called out, Blackwell's voice, thick with whiskey and righteousness. "Mariah Caldwell, you got 1 minute to come out. We're here to finish what should have been done weeks ago." Josiah moved to the door. Mariah grabbed his arm. "There's another way," she said quickly. "The brand. They did it in the church basement. There's blood still on the stones where they held me down. And the iron, they left it there. Evidence." Josiah's eyes sharpened. "Can you get to it?" "If we live through tonight." A torch arced through the air, hit the barn roof. Flames caught fast in the dry wood, crackling loud and hungry. The men outside cheered like it was a celebration. "All right," Josiah said. "New plan. We give them a fight they won't forget. Then we get that evidence before sunrise." He handed her the shotgun. "You remember how to use this?" "Yes." "Then let's make some noise." He kicked open the door and fired 3 shots fast, not at the men, but at their horses. The animals screamed and scattered, throwing riders into the dirt. Chaos erupted in the yard. Josiah dropped behind the water trough, reloading smooth and quick while bullets splintered the cabin wall. Maria crouched by the window, waited for a clear shot. One of Blackwell's men rushed the porch. She fired. The blast caught him in the shoulder, spun him sideways into the dirt. He didn't get up. "That's for Samuel," she whispered. The barn was fully ablaze now, lighting the night like a second sun. Smoke poured thick across the yard, and Josiah used it, moving fast and low toward the well. 2 more shots. A man cried out. Another dove for cover behind the fence. Then Blackwell himself appeared, torch in one hand, revolver in the other, his face twisted with rage. "You're dead, Trent! You hear me? Dead!" Josiah stood up from behind the well, rifle aimed steady at Blackwell's chest. "Drop it!" Blackwell laughed, wild and mean. "You ain't got the sand." The shot came from the road, not from Josiah, not from Maria. Sheriff Good sat on his horse at the edge of the firelight, rifle smoking in his hands. Blackwell's torch fell from his grip, and he clutched his arm, blood streaming between his fingers. "That's enough," Good said quietly. He wasn't alone. Behind him rode Martha Yates's brother, old Tom Dunaway, and 5 other men from town, the ones who'd stayed silent in the church, but who'd listened when Martha spoke. The ones who'd remembered Samuel Caldwell was a good man. "Drop your weapons, all of you." Blackwell's men looked at each other, looked at their bleeding boss, and slowly lowered their guns. Good dismounted, walked through the smoke to where Blackwell knelt in the dirt. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to murder, for assault, for attempted arson." He looked at the burning barn, then at Maria standing in the cabin doorway with the shotgun. "And for whatever else the judge wants to add when he gets here." Blackwell spat blood. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Good said, "but I already regretted the other thing." As dawn broke gray and cold over the valley, Maria and Josiah rode into Prospect Bend with Sheriff Good and the others. They went straight to the church, down into the basement where the air still smelled like fear and burning flesh. The branding iron lay in the corner, exactly where they'd left it. The letter M still crusted with Maria's blood, and on the stones dark stains that told the story better than any words. Martha Yates came down the stairs behind them, carrying a lamp. She looked at the iron, looked at Maria, and her face went hard as flint. "Let's burn it," she said. "All of it. The iron, the stones, every piece of their righteous judgment." They built a fire in the churchyard as the sun rose, fed it with the branded stones, the iron, the wooden beam they'd tied Maria to. Reverend Coltrane watched from his window, but didn't come out. The flames climbed high, and the whole town came to see. Section 5. The Garden of Stones. Survival ain't the same as victory. But sometimes it's enough. Sometimes a scar becomes a map, and a quiet morning becomes proof you're still breathing. The circuit judge came on a Tuesday, 2 weeks later than expected. By then the story had already spread. How Maria Caldwell had been branded and accused. How Josiah Trent had stood beside her. How the town had cracked open like a rotten egg to show what festered inside. The trial lasted 3 days. They held it in the church because it was the only building big enough, though Reverend Coltrane had quietly left town the week before. Blackwell sat in chains, his arm bandaged, his face no longer red with rage, but gray with the knowledge of what was coming. The ring was entered as evidence. Samuel's letter to Josiah, warning of threats. Martha Yates testified about the branding. Sheriff Good admitted he'd looked the other way when he shouldn't have. one of Blackwell's own men, facing his own charges, confessed they'd caught Samuel at Widow's Bend, beat him unconscious, and held him under the water until he stopped struggling. Then they'd moved the body downstream to make it look accidental. It was for the water rights, always had been. The judge, a hard-faced man from Denver with silver spectacles and no patience for frontier justice, sentenced Blackwell to hang. 2 of his men got 20 years in territorial prison. The others were run out of the county. Mariah sat through all of it, with Josiah beside her, her hand resting on her belly, where the baby kicked steady and strong. She didn't cry when they read the verdict, didn't smile, just nodded once, slow and certain, like she was marking the moment in her bones. After she walked out into the autumn sun and breathed air that tasted different. Cleaner, maybe, or just emptier now that the weight of accusation had lifted. "What will you do now?" Martha Yates asked her on the church steps. The schoolteacher's face was softer than it had been, but lined now with the cost of standing up. "Go home," Mariah said simply. "Raise my child. Work the land Samuel died for." "You'll need help." "I know." Martha squeezed her hand. "You'll have it." That winter was hard. The barn had burned to nothing, and they had to rebuild before the snows came. Josiah stayed. He never said for how long, but his saddlebags remained unpacked in the corner of the cabin. And every morning he was up before dawn, mending fence or chopping wood or fixing the things Samuel had left undone. He didn't talk much. Neither did Mariah. But there was a language in the work, in the way he set coffee to boil before she woke, in the way she mended his torn coat without being asked. A quiet understanding between 2 people who'd walked through fire and found themselves still standing on the other's side. The baby came in February, during a blizzard that buried the valley in white. Martha and 2 other women from town came to help, and Josiah waited outside in the cold, pacing like a caged wolf, until he heard the cry. A girl, dark-haired like Samuel, with Mariah's fierce eyes. They named her Clara, after Josiah's sister, who died young. When spring came, Mariah did something no one expected. She gathered stones from the river, smooth ones, river-worn and patient, and built a low wall around Samuel's grave, on the hill overlooking the cabin. Then she planted wild flowers inside the wall, columbine and lupine and Indian paintbrush, things that would come back every year without needing tending. On the largest stone, she carved 2 words with a chisel and mallet, her hands steady. He stayed. It wasn't poetry, wasn't fancy, but it was true. Josiah found her there one evening as the sun set gold over the mountains. Clara was strapped to Mariah's chest in a sling, sleeping against her heartbeat. The brand on Mariah's collarbone had healed into a scar, visible when the wind pulled at her collar. She didn't hide it anymore. "You did good," Josiah said quietly, looking at the garden of stones. "So did you." He was quiet a long moment. Then, "I'm thinking of staying, if you'll have me. Not as, anything but help. And maybe family, if that sits right." Mariah looked at him. This broken soldier who'd ridden in carrying ghosts and stayed to help her fight her own. There was no romance in it. No sweeping declarations, just the simple truth of 2 people who'd survived and decided survival was better together. "That sits right," she said. They walked back to the cabin as the stars came out, Clara between them, the land spreading quiet and vast all around. The water ran clear in the spring Samuel had died protecting. The cattle grazed fat in the pasture, and smoke rose steady from the chimney Josiah had fixed. It wasn't triumph, wasn't happily ever after, but it was life, earned and hard-won, and real, and sometimes in the territories where justice came slow and mercy came slower. That was miracle enough. Years later, travelers passing through Prospect Bend would see the Caldwell place from the road. The neat cabin, the strong fences, the garden of stones on the hill. They'd hear the story of the widow who was branded and accused, who found her husband's ring in the river and proved the town wrong. Some said she was a saint. Others said she was just stubborn. But those who knew her best, Martha and Sheriff Good, and the few others who'd found their courage that Sunday morning in the church, they said something different. They said Maria Caldwell was a woman who refused to disappear, who turned her scar into a declaration, who planted flowers in stone and raised a daughter in a place that tried to destroy her. And maybe that's the real question, stranger, as you sit by this fire tonight. When the world burns your name into your skin, do you run from the mark, or do you make it mean something new?